All right, I want to talk about true peaks today and how it's actually better not to do true peak limiting and not to worry about true peaks. So let's take a look at this really quick. Partly this was brought on Echo Soundworks, Shane from Echo Soundworks, excellent sound designer, but he brought up something that confused me. He is talking about, well, if you have true peaks and you do these cuts in an EQ, right, like you can actually end up peaking, right? Even though you're cutting, you end up peaking higher. So let's take a look at that, right? So you can ignore the true peak for a second just look at these regular meters, but you'll notice we're right at 0. And if we make a cut, we actually are almost 3 decibels, right? You can see up here, look at the shape up here. And if we turn that off, right, and so even though we're louder on average, there's this little peak. And so first thing to note is this has nothing to do with true peaking, right? If we were to turn on this true peaking limiter such that we are no longer true peaking, first we'll go back into why you shouldn't do this in a second, but you'll have the same result, right? Basically exactly the same result, right? Maybe a little bit less above 0, but you're still going to get peaks that are above 0 from cutting. And that's because what you're doing when you do these cuts, you're fundamentally changing the alignment of phase of different frequencies. And so some of those waves, like those different frequencies, are going to be in coherence, at certain times such that they peak higher, right? It's just a fact. Especially if you're doing clipping, because what it's fundamentally done in order to get all those samples to be right at that even line, let me show you what I mean. But if we go to just sample interpretation here, right, well, you can see all these samples. In order for those samples actually to end up there, it's changing the phase and some of the frequencies and stuff like that, which is why you hear what you hear. But basically, it's just like you're never going to have all these samples so evenly line up at the top without changing phase. So some of it's going to be higher. It's just guaranteed to be higher than 0, which is why you should just clip it again. Right, tiny little bits of clipping. You won't even be able to hear it. And actually, the speakers will reproduce those true peaks. You're clipping off the digital peaks, but the true peaks remain, and so you actually still have pretty much the same shape that the speakers tracing out when it gets converted back into current through the digital to analog converters, right? It connects them with these squiggly sine waves, right, which will ultimately create these true peaks. Cool. So, all right, so we've gone into what's going on with these true peaks, that you're going to get peaks above 0 anytime you do EQing, and that if you just cut those peaks off again, right, then you'll be flat at 0. I haven't talked about why you want to do this. One of the main reasons is you can think about the rest of your song sort of vibrating along the top of your kick if you were to separate out the sounds. And so because your kick is at the highest level of your song, that creates a nice flat plateau on which the rest of your song can vibrate. Same thing with your sub. And so when you do that, your compressors and everything will react much more honestly to them. It's not like this one little 4 decibel spike way up there that's telling your compressor to like clamp down hard, and all of a sudden you're clamping down on this stuff that's way quieter because it's just for a little instant that it was that high. So if you're in peak mode in a compressor, yeah, this stuff will ruin it. Same thing with limiters. It'll mess up your limiters. Now let's go back to this true peak mode. I want you to now, I'm going to turn off this and turn off this cut. And so I want you to look at this. Right, so it's not on. And we have this nice transient, and you can hear it. It's a nice knock. If we turn this on, check out what happens. Right, look at all of that rounding. We're like whooping into it, and we only actually get to full scale, like, I don't know, almost 50 milliseconds. Right, like it's adding, this attack is what, like 15 milliseconds or something of compromised attack. If you've ever messed with fades or anything, you know that even a few milliseconds of fades can compromise the attack of your kick, right? So if you're doing this true peak stuff, you're compromising your transients, all your true peak transients you're compromising them, and it's going to squash down like the kickiness of your drums in general. So you might be asking, well, Lynx, why don't we want to take care of this? Isn't it bad to have true peaks? Then we're going to be distorting or whatever. No, you're not. Right? We have been having true peaks for decades at this point. It's built into the circuitry. Right? Ever since we had digital to analog converters, they're like, okay, we're going to have all these individual sampled dots. Like we have to connect these, creating this circuitry. There's going to be overages because of the wave physics of it all, right? So they built in headroom into all the speakers and everything. There's headroom already built in. And I know for a fact that Noisy does not care about true peaks. Seth Drake, who does mixing and mastering for Bass Nectar, does not care about true peaks, right? And like I said, the systems already have the analog headroom built in to handle the true peaks. So when you put on true peak limiting, just because it's a new thing doesn't make it a good thing. Uh, you know, we have the technology now and it's being incorporated into technology like Pro L and such. But ultimately, it's listening for stuff that your system's already being designed to handle, and then the way it reacts is it's fundamentally uh, ruining the transient response of your drums, and it's just not worth it. So yeah, if you're going to do EQing of any sort of thing that's around full scale, you might find that it actually increases the volume even when you're cutting. I recommend clipping little tiny bits here and there just to get these extemporaneous things, right? Like these little tiny peaks that this creates, right? They're so short, right? Right? They're a fraction of a like, a couple milliseconds, right? Super, super short. You're not going to be able to hear the difference between that. And like I said, by the time it gets to current, there's still going to be that spike in the true peak, but it doesn't matter because all the hardware is designed to handle those overages. Okay, I love you guys very much. Hopefully this made sense to you. Um, it really helps to do little bits of clipping along the way to help your compressors and limiters remain more honest and not have these like weird spikes in them. Don't worry about the true peaks too much. I really recommend do not use true peak limiting at all if you're going to use Pro L or any other limiter that has true peak limiting in it. Like I said, Noisia, Seth Drake, none of them care about the true peaks at all. I used to when I was being more nerdy about it, and then I realized that it's fucking up my compressors and limiters, and the hypothetical change in sound or distortion that I might be hearing versus the actual screwing up of my transients and everything. It's just not worth it. Right. Love you guys. Take care.